Welcome to another edition of the Eye on Life podcast. It is go time, and we are thrilled that you have taken time out of your day, your morning, your evening, whenever you happen to be watching or listening to the show, to join us on the Eye on Life podcast. You can share it, like it, all of the above. We're trying to share this podcast for the people with the masses, and we have a great topic today. And we have two very special guests, and they've already started to confuse me because we have Kristen and Christine, who I am going to introduce in just a second. So they've already started to make life hard for me here, which, you know, the interior decorators, designers, this is what you guys do, I guess, right? You guys are there to, I know you're there to make people's lives happier and better. I know that. I'm just giving you a hard time, but that is very confusing. So if I interchange the two here today, I apologize for that. Before we get started, I do want to I want to shout out to the continent of Asia. And the reason why is because over the past week, we've had an influx of listeners from Asia that have been listening to the show. It shows up on my weekly metrics, and I'm thrilled about that. And the reason why I said continent of Asia, because I wanted to make sure people didn't think that the 80s band was listening. Although if they are, I'd be thrilled. The Heat of the Moment was an amazing song. I loved it. Great 80s band. But I'm really excited about that because now I can truly call this an international podcast, which I do. Doesn't matter that it's only 3 people. No, I'm kidding. It's a little bit more than that. And my question, and I want to engage both of you in this conversation. And the reason why I was thinking that, obviously, most of our listeners so far are from the United States, which is great. But it got me to thinking there are a lot of random thoughts on this show. We have a lot of random thoughts. If you listen to the show before, we digress a lot. We think about, things that we talk about during daily life, right? And the random thought that I had this past week was David Hasselhoff. Okay. And the reason why I connected Asia with David Hasselhoff is because, he was never really accepted here in the United States. And I feel bad about that because this guy has tremendous talent. He was in Knight Rider, which I think is one of the best shows of all time. And he was a singer. Now, I know maybe he wasn't the best singer in the world, but he was a singer. He's an entrepreneur, right? Baywatch. Who didn't love him in Baywatch? And he was big in Asia. I think it was Japan he was big, and he was also huge in Germany. And I sort of feel like we never gave him the due credit in this country that he deserved. And I still feel like he's been mocked. I mean, there was an episode of South Park where he was mocked. They made fun of David Hasselhoff. And, he's kind of he's the punchline of a lot of jokes, like the band Nickelback, which I'm not getting into that today. We're not going there today. Maybe we will at some point. So I was wondering if maybe I would follow in the footsteps of David Hasselhoff. Maybe I will be big in Asia and maybe overseas, but maybe not so much here. I don't know. I mean, I hope I'm big here too at some point. But I guess my question, Christine Conti and Kristen McCrory, who are our two guests today. Kristen Conti, if you're watching, is in the black attire, and just so we don't confuse the two. And Christine, see, I did it again. See, Christine McCrory, Kristen McCrory. Is in the white blouse. Is that a blouse, right?
Sure.
Not everybody is watching us on YouTube. Some people are listening. So I'm just trying to break it down for people. So let me ask you this question as we get started here today. I think David Hasselhoff is the man. Okay. He's had a great career. He's done a lot. He's made a lot of money. I don't know if people consider him a heartthrob or a joke. I really don't know, but people should not consider him a joke. Should I aspire to be the David Hasselhoff of podcasts? Should I? Is that something I should aspire to? What do you think?
Negative.
Say that again. I didn't hear that. I want to hear this loud and clear because I get fascinated with certain people, and David Hasselhoff is another one of these guys that I am absolutely. And the ironic thing is, as people have heard, I go crazy. I go nuts over people who jog without shirts on. I think it's terrible, right? And I guarantee David Hasselhoff does. I'm not giving him a pass on that, but should I aspire to be the David Hasselhoff of podcasts? What do you think? No? Really? Why?
Because you'll be the butt of every joke.
But he's successful.
I've David many, many times.
You've made fun of the guy, but we can't argue with the success. I mean, Michael Knight on Knight Rider?
I know. I watched every episode.
Of course you did. So how can on one hand this guy be this millionaire? And he's an entrepreneur too. I mean, he's got business ventures, right? Christine Conti, come on. Kristen McCrory is saying he's a joke. Don't be David Hasselhoff. I'm saying I would be David Hasselhoff.
Try to be him.
I shouldn't aspire to it.
He's like Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise makes a fortune, but in every single movie, he's Tom Cruise. He's got zero acting ability. And I feel that way of David. It's like, okay, shot of David with his little, no shirt and his lifeguard preserver, but he was the same in Baywatch as he was in Knight Rider. I thought the car had more personality than David.
Well, the show was about the car. Let's be real.
Yeah, see, I watched it too.
We're starting the show on a very bad note here because I'm going to take issue with both of those, okay? Because the fact that he can go from Knight Rider to Baywatch and then have a singing career in Germany, right?
I've never heard him sing. I will admit that.
Well, he's huge in Germany. I'm just telling you, he never made it. We don't have appreciation for the culture. And the other thing, and I want to take issue, okay? Because Tom Cruise, right? I'm going to take issue with that because A Few Good Men is one of my favorite movies. And
it is.
It was a phenomenal movie, and I love a lot of. I mean, Risky Business. I know that's going back now. We're talking, but I love. He got a little odd. He started going a little crazy when he jumped on the couch on Oprah's show, right? The whole Scientology thing. I get that, but I feel like Tom Cruise. I don't really feel like he is Tom Cruise. Mission Impossible versus Risky Business. You can't tell me that's the same guy.
It's Tom Cruise.
I feel like he's always the same guy.
All right. Well, I was hoping for a different reaction here on this, but anyway, David Hasselhoff should be proud of himself, and I would actually love to have David Hasselhoff on the show at some point because I do not think he's a joke. I think he's a talent.
I bet you could get him here too.
You think I get him?
Absolutely.
I have to go through his agent because he's probably huge. Anyway, here's another question I want to ask you because we have two, and I want to make sure I say this correctly. Is it interior designers? I want to make sure I have the verbiage correct. I don't want to offend anyone. Okay. So we have two world-class interior designers with us here today. Okay.
World-class. Woo.
You are world-class. And we have Christine Conti and Kristen McCrory. Thanks again for that, by the way. Thanks for having such similar names. And I want to ask you this question. So let me ask you this question. Okay. So you're mocking Tom Cruise. You're mocking David Hasselhoff. But I want to ask you a serious question before we get to your backgrounds a little bit here. Okay. Let's start with David Hasselhoff. Okay, David Hasselhoff comes to you because you're world class, right? He comes to you, he finds your website, and he comes to both of you, right? He wants you to collaborate on a project for his home, probably somewhere out in Malibu or something like that, right? And there's no budget. He comes to you and says no budget. First off, I don't want you to tell me that you're turning him down. Okay, you're not turning down David Hasselhoff. The other thing I want to ask is, how would you decorate David? I was going to say Daryl Hasselhoff. David Hasselhoff. How would you design his home? Let's say he has a nice mansion. Although I bet you he's a humble guy, so it might not be a mansion. How would you design his home?
Go, Christine.
If he gave you carte blanche.
Obviously, I want to know a little bit about David.
You know about David. We just went over David. Okay, David is a star.
Yeah, but that's his persona he puts out there. I'd be more curious if that is his actual persona, or who knows? Maybe he's a little freaky. You never know.
That's true. He was in a SpongeBob SquarePants movie too. So I mean, the guy goes from Baywatch, he's on Knight Rider, and he's doing SpongeBob movies. I mean, that's multi talent right there. But so he comes to you and says, "Listen, he seems like a nice guy. Decorate my house. I'm leaving. I'm going to Germany on tour for 6 months. When I come back, I want my house decorated. I don't care what you do. Use your talents. How are you decorating David Hasselhoff? I can't even say his name. Hasselhoff. Say it 5 times fast. How are you decorating his house?
It's a loaded question, I think.
It is a loaded question. That's what we aim for on this show.
But there's a process in interior design, which we're not tapping into right now.
Okay, in general, what would you say? Do you think he's a colorful guy? Do you think he's a minimalist? Do you think he should have self-portraits? Do you think he should? What do you think, based on what you know?
I think he would definitely have self-portraits.
He would have self-portraits.
Some kind of room for all his Emmys and trophies and all these other things he has, right?
Yes.
That is true. Yes. Now, if he invited you over and say cocktails and he wants to have a conversation with you, would you go, or would you be like, no, you're David Hasselhoff, I'm not going?
I would absolutely go.
I would totally go. I'm so curious about people all the time anyway, which is one of the reasons we like to do this. It's finding out about people and trying to interpret that into their homes. But that's why I can't say anything. I don't know anything about David Hasselhoff, the person.
Okay, well,
Are we talking the big purple velvet bed, or
Yes.
are we talking?
You know the guy has a velvet bed, probably has a water bed, right? I'm telling you this right now. I am not an interior decorator. I am not an interior designer, but I'm telling you, I know there are going to be pictures of lions and tigers in there, right? There's going to be pastel, right? It has to be pastel in his abode, right? He's got to have a huge garage, and I guarantee it's like the cleanest garage ever with all of his cars. Okay, and I'm seeing color. I'm seeing kind of a nice place to entertain. I bet you the guy entertains by has a nice backyard, likes to barbecue with his friends. That's where I'm going with David Hasselhoff. Okay, that's where I'm going. But you're not really giving me an answer on David Hasselhoff. But we're gonna get back to that later. Then I'm gonna follow up on this question later on the show. So interior designer. So let's start with you, Christine Conti. You are the owner of Christine Conti Interior Designs.
Yes.
And I want to know how you got into this business. I always find it fascinating how people choose to do what they choose to do in life. And I don't like this kind of thing. This is why there are people like you guys out there, because I have no interest in doing this. So in my own home, I want to live in a nice home, but I need people to help me because I am severely challenged when it comes to this kind of thing. So how did you kind of get into this as a career?
It's actually a second career for me. I have my RN, and I spent 4 years working in pediatrics at NYU and 10 years working on a psychiatric unit at New York Hospital. But I was always interested in interiors and was always decorating friends' apartments and whatnot. And after I had my son, I decided to change careers to something that might give me more time with him. So that's how that came about. But I still use my psych training a lot. It's getting to know people and interpret things. And sometimes what they're not saying is just as important as what they're saying. So it's a lot of how to learn to read the client so that eventually they're happy at the end.
Is interior design, is it one of those things where the client is always right? Because I imagine that you guys, and we're going to get to Kristen in a second here because I want to know about your background, and we're going to talk about your athletic prowess as well. But is it something where, I mean, how much is it when you go in to meet with a client, right? And they want something and you know it's not the right thing. Do you push back a little bit? I mean, when people hire you, are they hiring you to tell you what to do, or are they hiring you because they want your expertise? Christine, I'm sticking with you on that one.
I'd say both. I mean, if somebody has I need yellow in my project, I love yellow. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to paint the whole room yellow. It might, but probably wouldn't. But there would be some yellow represented in a way in that room that made sense so that they were happy with it. A lot of times clients they're not responsible for the end product, but as long as what they love is interpreted in the design, I would say that's a successful project.
I also want to make note that you are based in Long Island, New York.
I am based in Huntington, Long Island, and Kristen will make fun of my Long Island accent in a few minutes, I'm sure.
Well, I was calling out the whole Long Island location because I didn't want people to know that when they hear the accent. Yes, it is a Long Island accent. It's a great accent. I'm an upstate New Yorker. I appreciate the Long Island accent. We're thrilled to have you with us here today. And let's go to Kristen McCrory now. So, Kristen, you're based here in Connecticut, obviously. We know that. And I have to ask you a question before we get into your background and how you got into this, right? And I love the background that you have there today. I appreciate you showing off your lovely home in the back there. It looks very cozy.
Because it was a little messy, so.
That's okay. I don't see any. I think I see a beer bottle in the back there, but other than that, you're fine. I know, right? Could be bourbon. And I have to ask you a question before we get started. Now, is your favorite color orange? Because we know, and you know why I'm asking that question.
I bleed orange.
You bleed orange. We know this. So Syracuse Orangemen in the house, and I know some of my Syracuse friends are thrilled that I'm bringing that up. And before we get into your background, you were a Division I athlete at Syracuse University.
Yes.
You played women's basketball. And I'm wondering, so if you could just give me a little bit of an overview of the Syracuse. Now it's the Orange now, right? When you were there, was it the Orange Men? It was the Orange Men,
Yeah,
right? And
orange man, orange woman.
that's not PC, so it has to be the orange.
Yes.
And I've always loved the Syracuse colors. And now, how was it wearing the orange when you were there? Are you an orange person? Like, I mean, not an orange person, not your color, but are you an orange? Is that like a color that you like? Is that a color that you incorporate into your design?
I don't really use it in my design much, but I do like the color.
You have to. I know. You bleed orange. Now, what position were you? You were
I was
a
power forward.
power forward. And I, because we're based in Connecticut, I have to bring it up. And we talked about this before, right?
Yep.
You played against UConn.
Yes.
Okay. How was it playing against UConn? I know you played against Rebecca Lobo. You played against Sue Bird, several others, Gino, and anybody who's not based in Connecticut that listens to the show. Connecticut is one of the, it might be the only state where when you move here and you're talking about the basketball programs, you can say the men and the women without actually saying UConn, and people know what you're talking about. Because it's a way of life here, right? So when you were at Syracuse, did you guys ever beat UConn?
We did.
You did beat UConn.
Year. We ended their 62-game winning streak, I want to say. Which,
how many points did you have in that game?
I don't know. I think 18.
Nice. All right.
I will remember that one.
So who did you cover? Did you have to cover any of those big names that we talked about?
Yeah, I played, Jamel Elliott, Rebecca Lobo, Kara Walters. Those were mainly the people that I covered. So
you beat UConn. That's huge. I mean, I think we could do a whole show on that. Maybe we'll get Gino or EM on the show. You guys can go at it. So you graduated from Syracuse. You played basketball. And how did you get into interior design? I said, in all seriousness, you have a lovely background there. And I know you do great work. You have a great reputation here in Connecticut. How do you get into this whole thing? You're a basketball player, a Syracuse grad. I'm not seeing a lot of interior designers coming out of Syracuse.
I just always loved design. So even in my teen years when my friends were getting Teen Beat magazine, I was like, Mom, can you get me the Architectural Digest when she went to the grocery store? And I think the first time I realized it's what I wanted to do is my mom had hired an interior designer from Ethan Allen, and they came in and they redid the whole entire living room area, and they redid my sister's bedroom, start to finish. So I remember being home and watching the process as we had to stay in the back room, and they installed. The whole room got emptied, and they installed the whole entire room, styled it, and put it together, and then we had the reveal. And I remember that I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And it was like from that point forward, I always wanted to do interior design.
Did you try to guide them? Did you try to micromanage your own home at that
No,
point? Was it something you did?
My mom shoved me to the back room, so.
and now they'd probably call you over to do it right now. So we talk about, again, there are a lot of different items when it comes to interior design, right? And, homes. And, we talked about the quarantine and everything, obviously, that we've been in for a while now. We're starting to get back out there, but it seems like this is an opportunity. Now, I don't know how your business has been. Have you seen an uptick in the amount of people that are looking to maybe create different spaces in their homes because they're now stuck in their homes? And again, people are starting to get back out now a little bit more, but over the past 6 months, it's been a little claustrophobic, right? You want to have a nice environment to live in and you can't go out. So are you guys seeing, is this a trend now? I mean, is this trending out in pop culture and society? Are more people utilizing interior designers? And whoever wants to take that question.
I'd say yes, but there's all different levels of design. So I think between HGTV and all the TV series that are going on and just interior design is out there now. Everyone knows about it. Everyone, you walk into any furniture store, they have designers on staff. So there's different levels. And I think, yes, that with the pandemic, that I've gotten multiple calls from people who have downsized, who are now buying new homes because after being stuck in the house with the children in a small environment, they want to expand and go into a larger home with spaces that they can call their own.
You talk about HGTV, and Christine, I want to ask you about this, right? So I do talk to more and more people now that seem to be watching these shows on TV. And I love watching them. They're turning homes over, right? They're designing, and some of the things. I mean, you see some of the nightmares out there, right? These people, it's like the equivalent of these bridezillas, right? These crazies that are micromanaging the process. And I think HGTV is probably helping the industry also, right? Because it's making it more mainstream. I'm as I said, I don't enjoy doing my own, but I love watching these shows. I find them very relaxing. I really do. And what I'm noticing is that there are some people out there, okay, who are absolutely out of their minds. Right? They want things done a certain way. They won't deviate from that. So, Christina, have you, and I don't know, I don't want you, you're not going to call it out any of your clients. I get that. But are there some people who are just absolutely impossible to work for? Not David Hasselhoff. We know that. But, you know, it seems like it's a very, and I get it. I understand that people want to have things a particular way. It's their home, right? But how do you sort of balance that when you're having these conversations with people? And you, again, you said it before, somebody wants a room all yellow and you're like, no. I mean, how do you sort of balance what they want versus what you think is best for them?
It's really a dialogue and an expectation with the client. They're bringing you in. I mean, if you're talking about the pandemic, there's a lot of people now who have realized like open concept homes are not really great for when everyone is at home. And they might not have realized that until the pandemic, because all of a sudden dad's on a Zoom call, kids are on Zooms. It's too much noise level going on. And a lot of people are trying to get away from that now. So it's the same thing. You kind of have to educate them about what they're liking, but what the end product is going to be. And I'll let someone go with it unless I think it's going to be an end result that they're really going to be unhappy with. And then I'll push back. If it's going to result in something that's going to get me called back and say, you know what? This totally isn't working. I totally don't like this. That I'll push back on. But if it's a certain aesthetic that they feel they want incorporated into their home, I'm fine with that. I go home at the end of the day. You know, that eventually is going to be their place. And if something is going to make them happy, that's their place. It might not be something I want to eventually photograph then because it's something so personalized, but they need say too. But I guide them to safe choices. I feel like that's my job.
Have you ever done a job for someone and then they come back to you a week later and be like, I don't like this at all. It's not your fault. It's my fault. I asked you to do this, but God, it's awful. Has anybody ever come back? You have to kind of.
It's not something you want to happen because that costs money.
Right.
And if they push to a point where nope, got to have this, sometimes you got to let them do it. And then they'll sit there and they'll look at you and they'll look at what they want and they're like, you were right. And I don't really take a lot of pleasure in that. You know, some people are like, yay, I was right. But, you know, now we need to fix it. That's something I try to avoid.
So I'm obsessed with pop culture. I really am. And as you, well, clearly from the intro to the show, right? And pop culture, music, sports. And I'm fascinated with how people decide to decorate their homes. You know, actually, and this is an industry, right? Because you go to LA and they have the tours of people's homes, right? I always remember the first time I was out in Los Angeles and they took me, and my uncle drove me by Aaron Spelling's home, right? That huge monstrosity right in the middle of wherever it was, Beverly Hills, Brentwood, wherever that was. And I'm fascinated with the size of people's homes, whether it's big or small. You know, some people are a little bit more nondescript with their homes. Some people say, look at me, I have this big, huge mansion, right? And I want to talk about a couple of different people, and I want to real homes. I want to talk about some real homes, and then I want to talk about some TV homes, okay? Which I just find fascinating because there's some homes on TV. I know they're studios, but I want to live in these. Even if they're a studio, I want to live in these things because they are awesome. But let me first start with a couple people, and I'm not making any light of this by any means, but I have to bring up Jeffrey Epstein, okay? And I know but I'm fascinated by, you know, the home that he had. Okay, so after he was convicted and thrown in jail, and after whatever you think, whether he killed himself or was killed, we can have a whole separate show on that. Okay, and I was fascinated though with the decor that he had in his apartment in New York City. I'm not going into some of the other places that he had. Okay, I don't even want to go there. I'm disgusted by it. I'm disgusted by any place that this guy ever breathed or lived in, right? But what he had in his New York City home, okay, I think it was on the Upper East Side. And I think urban living is especially fascinating. I just think it's amazing what people can do with little space, right? This guy had stuffed mounted heads on his wall, right, of animals. I think he had a stuffed black poodle. He had self-portraits, which I think is bizarre. He had a plastic doll chandelier. He had hallways with photos of eyeballs. It seems like a red flag to me. Okay, if I was in this guy's house 30 years ago, I would have been calling somebody to say something's not quite right here. Okay, now I know it's to each their own, but I feel like somebody could have stepped up and said, look at this guy's apartment, look at this guy's townhouse. I think we should look into him a little bit more. So I guess my general question is, what's your take on Epstein's New York City pad, right? You've read the stories. We know it's in there. And also, what does it say about someone, the way they decorate their home? Should we be worried? Should we be keeping if I walk into someone's home and there's a self-portrait of them naked in the lobby, should I be calling someone and saying this guy needs help or this woman needs help?
Yes.
Right? So tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on Epstein. Not him as a person. We established he's beyond the devil. We know that. But his decor. I'm freaked out just talking about it.
I watched the 4-part series, and it's the eyes. It was in all the things that he had up had eyes that were looking, and I just think that was his ultimate goal. He wanted you to feel watched and powerless in his environment, and all those eyes really, it was so creepy.
Kristen, what's your take? Because I know you're a very gregarious person. I know you'll say just about anything. What was your take on how this guy lived from a decor standpoint? We're talking about Jeffrey Epstein here. We know the horrors. We know the horrors of the person. I'm sorry. Go ahead. There's a little delay here.
Oh, I said I did not watch the Netflix series on it, but anything like that with eyes, that would my first thought would be like, are there cameras hidden in those eyes? Is he taping and watching everything I'm doing right now? Red flag, red flag.
So they are red flags. So it is, at the risk of sounding judgmental, and we've already established that I'm not sitting here on my high horse saying I'm not judgmental. I'm judging people, with no shirts on, right, when they're jogging, right? But I feel like when somebody has a certain decor, and again, when you hear these stories on the news of people like hiding, women and these guys, these serial murderers, serial rapists, and they have these homes and they go in afterwards and they're freaky. It's not like they don't look normal a lot of the time. So I feel like there are red flags that we should notice. Am I overreacting to that, or is that something
like
that,
Silence of the Lambs, when there's a mannequin there with the skin?
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
That would be a red flag for me.
That would be a red flag. So, okay, so let's talk about Jeffrey. So we talk about Jeffrey Epstein. We agree that his decor of his home was freaky. It probably wouldn't be our first choice. I'm guessing that people are not coming to you and saying, "Hey, Christine, give me the Epstein decor." Probably not happening. So let's move to some of the television, right? And over the years, there have been some places that I've loved on TV, homes on TV that I actually, you watch a show enough and you feel like it's almost your home, right? So I love the show 2.5 Men. Charlie Sheen is another guy. I'm obsessed with Charlie Sheen. I think the guy, and there's so much to him that I'm obsessed about. I think he's talented. I think he's got some craziness. I think he's got obviously some issue, but I love the guy. I think he's a talent. I really do. But I love 2.5 Men, and I love that Malibu beach mansion that he was in. He's the playboy, obviously, in the show. He's got all the women. So let me ask you this question. What are your thoughts on the way that – you might tell me that it was a terrible decor and he did a terrible – and I know it's disjointed. And they made reference in the show about it being disjointed, right, about the couch being mismatched with the mantle and all that, right? What's your take on the 2.5 Men Malibu beach home? Independent of where it's located, but the inside of it. I want to live there.
Did you like it? Did you notice they redecorated it halfway through the season?
They did, and then it was completely different when Ashton Kutcher came on the show. It was worse.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Which one did you like better?
Well,
Pre-Ashton?
I did not like the show when Ashton came on.
Okay.
The show is not the show when Ashton Kutcher came on. They could have decorated it. They could have been the best decoration ever. Okay, Charlie Sheen made the show. Alan was amazing. The characters were amazing. Ashton Kutcher ruined the show for me. I mean, I have a very there are Facebook groups. I'm part of these Facebook groups, right? And you can argue that all day. But no, I did not like the decor when they changed it. I liked the original when they first came on. I would live in that place. I love the deck. I love the fake plants. I know they had fake plants on there. What do you think? I mean,
I loved it, but
Okay, you did love it.
I love Spanish decor. The tiles that were up the steps and the archway doors and just, I mean, to me, that's a very Malibu style house anyway. Might look a little odd in a Northeastern house, but that was a great set. That was one of the sets like you feel like you're enjoying watching.
I love West Coast decor. Kristen, what do you think? So, in fact, forget that. I'm not even going to ask you that question. I'm going to ask you again. You dodged it before, but I'm bringing it up again with a different person. Based on what you know about Charlie Sheen, and come on, don't tell me you don't know him. You've heard enough about him.
Yeah.
Okay, I've seen some interviews done with him, and he's another one I want on the show. Okay, if I can ever get Charlie Sheen on the show, he has big shoes to fill with you guys being on the show here. But if I could ever get Charlie Sheen, I'm going to ask him questions that nobody's ever asked him before. Winning, Tiger Blood, and I'm going to ask him, and I want to be very clear when I say this. I'm asking him questions. I'm not going to ask him questions that everybody else asks him about all that winning. I'm going to ask him questions about his business. I'm going to ask him questions about his childhood. I want to ask him different questions. But anyway, again, I digress. How are you decorating? Kristen McCrory, right? Charlie Sheen gets up. You have a meeting with Charlie Sheen, and I suggest you have people around when you have that meeting. Okay?
Oh my God, I hate these questions.
How are you decorating that home for him? If that was his real home, how are you decorating Charlie Sheen's home? In a nutshell.
In a nutshell?
You dodged Hasselhoff. You dodged Hasselhoff. You're not dodging this
we
one.
had it done. It's the Spanish style and that whole Malibu look, that whole Spanish home, that it's eclectic, it's collected, it's colorful.
So you're getting colorful from Charlie Sheen, yes?
I am, yes.
Okay, so what if he moved to Connecticut? He wanted a home in Connecticut. What would you do for him then? East Coast. A lot of pressure here, I know. The background that we see here.
I have a process, so like none of this works for me right now.
I know we're doing this all extemporaneously. I know that you're going to ask him all these questions. Let me just here's the background here. If you work with Christine and Kristen, they have a whole process of they're going to work with you. We're not just going to sit down and ask random questions, but for the sake of the show, are you just what are you thinking for decor? Is he living by the water? Is he living in the woods? Are you putting up artwork for him? Couches, tables, chairs, minimalist. He's moving to Burlington, Connecticut, right? Where is he? He's going to be your neighbor. How are you doing? Is there a fence around his house? Privacy? How are you building this up for him?
Just laid back. I see him as a super casual, like collected type of person.
Okay, so he can have his Tiger Blood and his winning in a nice laid back kind of place. I'm not getting laid back from Charlie Sheen.
I think like he would have pieces that he'd want to incorporate that all have stories, and he would sit there during the interview and he would tell me a story about everything in his house and why it needs to stay and why he wasn't getting rid of those items.
Love it. If he ever owns a home in Connecticut, I want an invite. I want an invite to the housewarming party. That's all I'm saying, and I'll have him on the show, and we'll go from there. So I want to stick with the core of TV shows, again, pop culture. So. And I'm going to stay on the West Coast, and we're going to go to Three's Company now, right? And Three's Company is an institution. And if anybody's listening to the show and they don't know Three's Company, I can't help you, okay? I can't help you. I don't care if you weren't alive when it was around. You should know Three's Company. And if you don't, Google it. But Three's Company, and it's a blog, there's a whole website on this. It's called The Kids from 201 or something of that nature, which I think that was their apartment number. And I love that apartment. It was retro. They had that piece of artwork, but it was like a butterfly that said life in the back. And you can actually buy that now. You can actually go online and buy that, which I may do. And you had Jack, right? John Ritter, who, rest in peace, one of the best actors. That guy's body movements, like Jim Carrey, right? Body movements just made you just crack up. And he was living with the two women, and he was portrayed as being gay, so he could live in there with the two women. You know, Mr. Roper, the landlord, and then it was Mr. Furley, Don Knotts. And I love that apartment. Like, it was a bachelor pad. And Larry, and there's a site that they talk about that apartment. They talk about Mr. Roper's apartment. They talk about the Regal Beagle, the bar, right? Larry, the bachelor in that show. But I love Larry. I mean, Larry, Larry had like the disco ball in his. Didn't
they show Larry's apartment a few times? Wasn't it?
They
crazy?
did show his apartment a few times.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, by the way, before I go to the apartment, right? The Three's Company apartment. Is it ever okay to use a disco ball as decor in your place? Is that ever okay?
It depends. Talk to the boys at Madcap Cottage. The first thing they do anytime they move somewhere is hang a disco ball in their house.
If they're just because they're doing it does not make it acceptable. But I'm wondering, is that the ultimate cheesiness of decor? Because, and is it decor or decor? I want to make sure I'm being proper here when I say this. Is it decor?
Decor.
Decor?
Decor.
Decor, okay.
Decor.
I want to make sure I'm saying it right. I want to be refined.
Long
right?
Island says decor, though. No.
Oh, decor.
Oh, okay.
Say it however you
We
want,
say
right?
soda, so.
Can you put a disco ball in? And I see you guys are both like really anxious to answer this question because you haven't answered it yet. So is it ever okay to have a disco ball as part of your decor? Is it okay? Or is it's not?
I'm sure Charlie Sheen wants one, but probably in his bedroom.
Yes.
Okay, so bedroom it's okay, but maybe elsewhere in the house. So living room, the playroom for your kids, maybe not, but maybe with the you want a little romance going on in your bedroom, maybe you put that disco ball in there, it sets the mood.
I put one in the basement, my own basement, in my son's drum area. He wants the disco ball on and all the lights and everything. Makes sense.
Okay. I'm getting bad vibes on the disco ball here from Kristen.
No, when we would go move into our Newport house, we would bring a disco ball. It was the first thing we hung for our summer rentals.
There you go. But that's a rental.
Exactly. It would come home with that.
So there's
what else is coastal than disco ball?
Yeah, what else?
I think that should actually be a movement, a disco ball movement. You can't go wrong. I mean, has anybody ever looked at a disco ball and been in a bad mood? You can't be in the presence of a disco ball and be in a bad mood.
Nope.
I mean, the Travolta comes to mind. How can that be a bad thing? So what do you think of the Three's Company pad? Either one of you.
It's the Spanish decor. I mean, they played it up with bright colors and stuff like that. But it's still the arch door. It still had the Mexican tile in it, and it's just the influence of it.
So geography does play a role then, obviously, in how you're designing people's homes, right? What you get in Florida.
But they're movie sets, like, the New York Friends apartment, on their salaries, how big that apartment was, and with the terrace, that was not happening. Yeah. But I hated their purple door. Hated it.
That was a little unrealistic. We know what real estate is in New York City. Being in Long Island, you know that. Great apartment, though.
Yeah.
But it does impact, though, right? So if you're working with a client that's based in the Northeastern New England and you're working with a client that's in the Midwest or Phoenix, Arizona, right? You're probably coming to the table with different ideas, correct?
100%.
Okay, so we talk a lot about the Spanish decor, and I want to move now to Seinfeld's apartment in New York City, which was very basic. That seemed a little bit more realistic to me as far as design. I like that apartment. I know there were episodes where he was trying to get out of that apartment, but I think it was the Upper West Side, which I love. I love the Upper West Side. And was there anything that you feel like Seinfeld in the show could have done with that apartment to maybe make it a little bit more attractive to people? It was very basic. I liked it. But it was very well organized, I thought. It was fairly simplistic. And I thought the personality of Seinfeld was very much aligned with how that apartment looked. Is there anything that you would have done with that apartment to maybe spice it up a little bit? Because they did spend a lot of time in there. Kramer coming in and, barging through that door. What would you have done with that apartment?
It was always very gray to me. I always wanted to paint it.
Yeah, like the white walls.
The cabinets were like that grayish blue, and they just seemed, he basically moved into it as is.
He did.
That's how
and he went to IKEA. And he
Yes.
bought a table, a shelf, and a sofa.
Yep.
And then he had to get a new one when Poppy peed on it, but it was still the same IKEA sofa.
Wait, did they get rid of it, or did they just turn the did they turn the cushion around?
I think they tried to turn the cushion over, but I don't think Jerry could sit on it anymore.
He couldn't. I think, didn't he sell it to George? I think he may have sold it to George.
Oh, I thought Kramer took it.
Maybe Kramer took it. Either way, Poppy.
So I feel so out of the loop here.
So you're saying, so I just want to make this very clear.
It's clear Kristen needs to watch more television.
I know, very
watch
clear.
the Netflix series.
I'm going to bring you back in the loop in a second here, Kristen.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to make sure. So just for the record, and I think I know the answer to this, and you can answer this, Kristen, without having watched Seinfeld. But a pee stain on a piece of furniture is probably frowned upon. It's not it's not something that would probably be something that we would look for. Is that accurate? I just want to make sure.
I can answer that question.
Because there are many what do you think about fraternity houses? I know Kristen was hanging out in the fraternity houses down at Syracuse. I know Marshall Street. You didn't hang out? No?
No, I was an athlete. We didn't have time to go to frat parties and stuff.
But you've been in a fraternity house before, yes?
Yeah, I've
Both-
been in them.
both of you have been-
When I've gone back to Syracuse, because they always leave the door open. I have friends who are like, "Oh, let's go to a frat party," and then we just walk in, and then
Okay.
we are, "What am I doing here? I need to get out."
I have been in many fraternity houses, okay? And I feel like the bones are very nice. Like they have a lot of them, they have these, especially at some schools, right, where Greek life
The
is
ones in
huge.
Syracuse are stunning, and it's so sad to like look around and see what has happened to the house.
Well, that's what I want to ask you, right? Because you go into these homes, and they're beautiful homes. As I said, they have the bones, the structure, and you go in and they smell like beer, they smell like urine, they smell like vomit. And I'm not stereotyping; they do. Okay, anybody who's ever been in the fraternity, you know what I'm talking about. You know that smell.
Yep.
And I hope that the people listening, I hope you weren't a contributor to that smell. You may have been, but and then you go in there and you have the paddles. The paddles are on the walls, right? The paddles, which we're not going to go into in what they use those paddles for. And then you have the big photo, right, of the fraternity brothers. The little headshots, and that's basically it. There's a couch that's been broken in half.
Yep.
Right. There's another couch that looks like Poppy from Seinfeld bathed on that couch for months, right? Because it's urine soaked. So I feel like fraternities and sororities too. It's not just fraternities, okay? Sororities might be a little bit nicer, but they're bad too. I feel like there could be something done with these fraternity houses to make them a little bit more livable for the people who are there, right? And maybe these guys just don't care. But what so Kristen, you just mentioned that they're beautiful homes, right? What would you recommend? I'm a fraternity brother. I'm at Syracuse University, right? And we're having a conversation. What would you suggest? What should go behind the keg? What should go on in place of the paddles? I mean, it's a fraternity house, so it's not. We're not putting flowers in there, right?
No.
So, what do you think it should be? Would be an acceptable, something that relates. It could be sports, it could be music. What are you putting in there?
What do you put? You put the basics in there.
What are the basics?
How's that? We got to clean the house first. Let's get the house clean.
Okay, we've lost it there.
Question. I don't even know how to answer the question because they're just disgusting.
Well,
there's nothing you could do except move the fraternity out and then fix and renovate the house.
So there's no hope, basically. You're saying there's no hope.
Zero hope. Nobody's gonna treat it with care. So don't waste the money.
All right. That's really sad, actually. I think that's really sad. I feel like now I feel bad for fraternity houses. Christine, are you feeling the same way? Is it hopeless? I mean, because when Kristen said clean it up,
they're disgusting. I mean, other than maybe adding a kegerator.
Yeah.
Okay.
Corner.
But aren't there artists out there who work with garbage?
Well,
they're
there
garbage
are
artists.
designers now that go into sorority houses. I don't know about fraternities, but you go down south, the sorority houses are insanely decorated.
Gorgeous,
They're stunning.
So someone could come in and do something with the beer cans potentially. Yes.
Maybe.
Okay. So it's a start. So fraternities. So they're not hopeless. There is something there if they ever made the effort. If big if. Okay. So
they
let me ask you.
Wander though. I think they like it that way.
Yeah.
You need money for beer? Let's get our recyclables together, and you go to the store and you get more beer. It serves a purpose.
I tell you, we're talking about pop culture here, and interior design. I love the fraternity house and animal house. I thought was awesome. I mean, they had that great basement. You know, you had Otis and the Knights playing in the basement. That was, to me, that's what fraternity life is all about. I want to ask you both, because we talked about Seinfeld, his pad on the Upper West Side. We talked about Three's Company. We talked about Charlie Sheen, 3.5 Men, right? And we've talked about maybe what you would do with some of these stars. But I know there are minimalists, right? And I'm kind of intrigued by this because I've seen pictures in magazines before. Well, you have someone living in it could be a studio, it could be a house, right? But I've seen them like in studios, and there's nothing in the apartment. There's no furniture, there's no table, there's nothing. And I don't understand that. I mean, it's cool. I mean, I think it looks cool, but what's going on with that? Is that a red flag? Should I be worried about that person, or like, what is that? Because I'm not saying I need like the fanciest place to live, and I don't need, I'd love to have you guys come in and do your thing in my house. Maybe we'll talk about that off the air, right? But you're listening to the Eye on Life podcast, and I'm talking about the minimalist. I think it's a movement, almost. So what is that? I mean, why do people do that? I can't imagine not having a couch or a table to sit at. Maybe you can provide some insight on what this is and why people do it.
I've never seen that in a studio apartment, but have you seen Kanye West and Kim Kardashian's house? It's totally minimalist. There's nothing in certain rooms except maybe a chair. It's just, but they had a very famous designer do that, and that's the look they like. But I don't get it. It's, to me, a home needs to be functional, and minimalist done correctly can be nice, but it's the idea if there's only going to be 4 things in that room, they're going to be expertly picked out and arranged and curated. But I can't picture a studio with no furniture in it.
It's odd to me. Go ahead, Kristen.
Those items that they're choosing too, they're like pieces of art. So the chair is like, beautifully designed by an architect. It's not just a chair. There's a story behind it.
So maybe you can provide some context on this for me, because I find that interesting. Because if you look at Kanye West and Kim Kardashian, right? I'm thinking that they're going to have a place that's ostentatious beyond anything I've ever seen in my life. So the minimalist decor that they have at their place that you're talking about, to me, does not seem at all aligned with their personalities. But it's minimalist
to a degree that it is their personalities. I mean, all the walls are Venetian plaster. Like, they might just be white walls, but they're white diamond dusted walls with the most expensive bed in the room. So he's being ostentatious at the same time he's being minimalist, which is kind of him, because he's Jesus, right?
I think it's Yeezus, isn't it? It's not. It's Yeezus, I think. Something. Well, I think he's planning on running for president. So maybe the White House will have a whole different kind of decor.
Oh,
have you guys ever taken a tour of the White House? You know how they have those tours down in D.C. Or you've obviously seen inside the White House before.
Yeah.
What do you think? I know that it's a completely different kind of animal, the White House. Very presidential. A lot of history there. What are your thoughts on the White House? The decorations inside the White House. Would you, as interior designers, would you live in the White House and not change it? Would you be able to go in there and not touch it, or would you make it into something completely different? Because it's not my style, but you're the president, and you go in there. Kanye may be in there someday, right? God, let's hope not. I'm not even going to go off on that right now. We stay away from politics on the show. But what do you think of the White House as a place to live? Homey, warm, or not really?
I usually like what they do in the family residences. I liked what the Obamas had their designer do. But the main part of the White House is just, I don't know. It's too old, too many stars, too much red and blue. I don't know. I don't care for it at all. It just looks so old to me. Like, I want to touch it. I just know I couldn't touch it.
You'd have the Secret Service all over you if you tried touching any of those portraits.
I'm taking this rug out.
So when we started working on the show, and I was talking to Kristen, and I know you guys both do the same thing. And I have a couple more questions before I let you go here. But you guys are both in the business, and it sounds like maybe you've collaborated before, but I have to ask you, okay? You both do the same thing. So let's say Charlie Sheen, right, or Jerry Seinfeld, they're asking the two of you to come in and pitch, right, for separate jobs. Okay, you guys go in there. So what happens here now? You have the competitive basketball player that took down Rebecca Lobo and Gino Auriemma, and you have Christine here and I know Long Island people. Okay, they're not bashful. There's strong people in Long Island. I know that. Okay,
Yes,
being a New Yorker, went to school with a lot of Long Islanders. How are you guys presenting that? Are we doing a cage match to see who gets those accounts? Are you guys collaborating? I don't know the interior design industry that well, but you're obviously good friends. And again, it's been great having you on the show here. Iron Life Podcast, like, share, follow. But I want to know if it ever comes down to it, how are you guys handling that situation?
I don't think we handle. I think the client is the one that chooses.
So if somebody says that they want you, that all things equal, you're both amazing designers, and we said at the onset of the show, it's world class. I'm not kidding when I say that. You guys are world class people here. I've looked at what you've done, and it is right. How can we settle this? Is it a chess match? Is it a cage match? Is it one-on-one basketball? I mean, Kristen's going there with that one. How are we settling this if you're both equal on the design side? Is there anything that can be done to separate? Christine, you look like you have something you want to offer up, maybe. I won't hold you to it.
I don't know. Knowing Kristen and I, when we go to our design houses, we like to finish off the day with an Aperol spritz. So whoever finishes first wins. Look at that.
I like it. Now, I want to ask you the other thing that I meant to ask you, and of course, as we're having the show here, we might actually have to cut. This show might be long enough that we have to trim this to 2 shows as well, because we're on a roll here, and I don't want to cut it off. So we'll see where we're at here. I think we're almost at an hour, which is about where we stop. But I have to ask you, okay? We talk about our homes, and whether we're in quarantine or we're not in quarantine, our homes are a place where we feel safe. Our homes are a place where we feel hopefully comfortable. We can do whatever we want in our homes for the most part. We know Charlie Sheen does whatever he wants in his home, right? As far as escapes go, and I know, and I really don't like the term man cave, okay? And you guys can tell me a better way to say it. Man cave, and I know there's a female version of that too, but people who have an escape in their house, right? Whether it's the sports room, it's the music room, it's this bourbon and cigar room, whatever room that they have that they want to escape. How would you, and I'm asking this kind of selfishly because I do have some plans here, but how does one go about even starting to decide what that looks like? And has anybody ever asked you, to come in and say, I need this room for all my memorabilia, my sports memorabilia. Can you design it for me? I want it to be a place where I can escape. How do we escape our homes without leaving our house is my question. Christine, I'll ask you that first.
Well, I just finished in one home, a cigar lounge for the man of the house and a ladies' clubhouse for the lady of the house. They really kind of evolved. These happen to have evolved on their own. The husband is a big cigar smoker, and in the winter, he was taking a beach chair up to what's their attic that has a huge hatch that goes up to a very large widow's walk. So he thought during the winter he would take his beach chair up and go smoke his cigar. He liked it so much, he started inviting friends. So the wife says that there are 4 men upstairs in her attic in beach chairs smoking cigars with the hatch open, and that this needs to be something. And it's a very small space, but it ended up being everything he wanted it to be. It's got a bar in it, a humidor. He happens to collect baseball memorabilia. He also has a gun collection, so there were display cases. But it really is from the client's want and needs and what kind of vibe he wanted in there. It's got more of a modern vibe, but it's got a lot of deep smoky colors and a lot of layers and texture. And once that was done, the wife was kind of like, well, what about me? So what was supposed to be a guest room over the garage ended up being the ladies' lounge. And I'm not a shabby chic frou-frou kind of designer, so even that has a bit of a clean vibe to it. But it was mostly browns and blacks with pinks and creams, and it's a beautiful place for. She says she wants to go up there and watch The Housewives with her friends. So, but it's probably one of the most personal spaces I've ever designed too. People seem to really let themselves go in that kind of room as opposed to their living room when you ask them what they like. They kind of look at you like, well, I don't know, but you start talking about one of those rooms and the total personality comes out.
So, Kristen, I want to ask you, I want to build on that question with you, Kristen, and can we live in better harmony with our significant other if we have that kind of escape? And Christine, you made a really good point, because I feel like it's always the men. I feel like it's always men talking, my man cave. I have to go down and burp and grunt and watch sports. and that's why I feel like man cave is it sounds like you have a bunch of Neanderthals, down in their basement grabbing their crotches and watching the game, which they probably do. But can we, but I do feel like it is important. And even if you live by yourself, if you don't have a significant other, I feel like you need an escape. Can we create more harmony by having that kind of space, even though it's just part of our house, Kristen? What are your thoughts on creating a space that maybe is separate from the rest of the house, that aligns with something that you're passionate about?
I mean, absolutely. I think it's a great thing, because it's a room that's most likely going to be off somewhere away from everything else that's connected, and you can shut the door so it can be your own personal space. Nobody has to know about it, and you can make it whatever you want to any extreme.
Well, now you're scaring me. You said no one has to know about it. I mean, what are they doing down there?
I don't know. 50 Shades Gray, I don't know.
If nobody knows, let me just say this. If nobody knows about the room, that's a red flag. Okay? Because I don't know what's going on in that room. As we wrap up here, I want to give you both a chance before I ask you the last question here. Christine, if people are interested in learning more about you and your business, you're out on Long Island, you're near New York City. Where can they learn more about your business and finding that extra special escape in their room that people can find?
My website, ChristineContiInteriors.com, or same name on Instagram.
Now, Kristen's building rooms that people can't find, so I'm a little nervous. But actually, I don't want to be found, so maybe I'll call you over to my house. Kristen McCrory, you're based in Connecticut. There's a lot going on here architecturally. You have the shore, you have the city, you have the country. People want to know a little bit more about you. Where can they reach you and find more information? My
website, and it's McCroryInteriors.com, and Instagram is @KristenMcCrory.
So the final question I want to ask you, and this goes back to kind of tying it all together, but the psychological piece here. And we talked about a lot of different people. We talked about real homes today. We talked about homes that you see on TV. I forgot to talk about the Full House home. I like that one too. That was San Francisco. Love that one. That's a great house. I would love to live there. And I think people like tourists flock to that place and piss off all the neighbors. But I feel like a lot of times on TV, when people live in nice homes, and obviously even in real life, especially in real life, oftentimes where you live can reflect on your, how you feel, mentally. And I guess my question to both of you is, how important is that? How important is it to have a space? Because when people come to you, they're making an investment, right? And it's not a $100 investment. Okay. They're making an investment of a decent amount of money to have you guys come in and work your magic. And I want to just ask you as we end here, psychologically, having a home that you feel cozy in, and you have the right colors and the right couches and the TV in the right spot. How important is that, especially today where there's so much going on in society? There's so much going on in our homes, right? How important is it? Is it overstated, or is that really a key to being kind of sane and living a happy life, the space that you live in? Kristen, let me start with you, and then Christine, if you could answer that as well.
It's 100% very important. I think it's not just about how it looks and feels, it's how it functions. And we're all, I think, in today, the quarantine has changed us a little bit, but we're all on this giant hamster wheel, and we're going. So to come home and not have any projects and have a home that you can actually walk in, sit down, relax in is super important. It affects relationships. It calms your soul for the next day. I mean, there's a million things that go on. So yes, it's important.
I'm going to add to that question, and for Christine, that's great points. And Christine, I when you want to have a nice, let's say you're having a nice drink, like you said spritzer. No spritzers are allowed in the man caves. I can tell you that much.
I'm really a tequila girl.
That works too. But let's say, so, we're talking about psychological. I come home, hard day of work, or a lot of people working remotely, so you're at home, and you're trying to separate your space, but you want to go have a nice glass of bourbon, you want to have some tequila, nice margarita. Psychologically, how important is the design of where you're at? Because I just feel like there are some rooms where it's just not really appropriate to be drinking a beer. A wine is more appropriate in that room. Is that a thing where people kind of like, I'm in my bourbon and cigar bar here in my basement, so. How important is it though for people to kind of be in the surroundings that they're comfortable in and where they can feel like they can sit back, have a drink if you don't like booze, ice cold, Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi? How important is that?
I think your home is everything to you. I mean, that's why I do what I do. It's, coming home from work, having a place to relax, but also a place for, whatever is important to you. If you're the house that has everyone over and you're the family gathering house, to have a house that's designed to support that. Your house should support the kind of life you want to live. And that's where the function and the beauty come together. And I think that's why it's important to hire a designer. For the most part, I don't know if Kristen will agree with this, but when we walk in to talk to someone, it's always a problem we're solving. It's never that I need this room to be yellow. It's there's something the matter here and I need you to help me fix it. And we fix people's problems and we make their homes beautiful. So it really is on both levels. You're satisfying.
So the conclusions from today's show, I want to just state this before we go here, okay, for our listeners before next show, right? We have concluded that it's very important to live in an area that you're comfortable in. It's good for psychologically. It's good for everything, right? You want to be comfortable where you live. So that's key. We've established that if you want design work, Christine Conti and Kristen McCrory are the way to go. Okay, we've established that as well. We have established that there are red flags. So if you are in someone's house and you are creeped out, like Jeffrey Epstein's home, right? Say something, okay? We've also established that Charlie Sheen and David Hasselhoff are gods. And Three's Company and 2.5 Men and Seinfeld, some of the best shows out there. We haven't even covered it all, but and they have great living areas in those places. So we talked about interior design today. It's a fascinating topic. I want to thank you both for being with us. I learned a lot. And I can't say I'm inspired to do it myself, but I'm inspired to maybe have one of you come to my house and tell me what I lack in this department of life here. So I want to just upcoming shows. We're going to be talking about tattoos on an upcoming show. A lot of people have very strong feelings about tattoos one way or the other. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about motorcycle culture. Maybe there's a tie there between motorcycle culture and tattoos. Maybe we'll talk about that. When you get together with your high school friends, how just things kind of come out. Weird things, weird conversations. We're gonna have a little high school reunion on one of our upcoming shows, which should be very, very interesting. I don't know what's going to come about on that. We're also going to talk about vices. We talked about bourbon before. We talked about Charlie Sheen before, right? Talk about vices. So we're going to have a show that talks about vices a little bit, what vices are, why some vices are okay. So we have some really great upcoming shows. I hope that you will join us on shows. In the meantime, Kristen and Christine, I think I actually kept that pretty separate today. I think that was the biggest challenge. But do me a favor, and all listeners as well, especially the ones in the United States and, of course, Asia now. Until next time, keep an eye on life. Thanks for joining us.